Sarah Miller stared at the eviction notice stuck to her apartment door. 3 months behind on rent. The final straw in a year that had already taken everything else from her. She pulled it down before her son could see it, stuffing it into her pocket as she unlocked the door to their one-bedroom apartment. "Mom, can we get pizza tonight?" 8-year-old Ethan dropped his backpack on the floor, already heading for the small TV in the corner. "Not tonight, buddy. We've got leftover pasta." Sarah forced a smile, the paper in her pocket feeling heavier than it should. The apartment was small but clean, Sarah made sure of that. Photos of Ethan lined the walls alongside the few pictures she still had of her parents. The kitchen counters were worn, and the furniture had seen better days, but it was home. Or at least it had been. Sarah waited until Ethan was absorbed in his cartoon before pulling out the notice again. 30 days. That's all they had left unless she could come up with 3 months' worth of rent. Since losing her job at the local newspaper, budget cuts, they'd said, she'd been piecing together freelance writing work. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, Jennifer. "How's the job hunt? Did you call that contact I sent you?" Sarah hadn't. The contact was at her ex-husband's company, and pride had kept her from making that call. David had moved on quickly after their divorce 3 years ago, remarrying within a year. While he sent child support for Ethan, their interactions were strained and minimal. "I'll call tomorrow," she texted back, knowing she no longer had the luxury of pride. Later that night, after tucking Ethan in with a story about brave knights and dragons, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. The freelance job board showed nothing new. Her resume stared back at her, the gaps in employment growing wider. She'd been a respected journalist once, covering local politics and community issues. Now she was writing product descriptions for online retailers and struggling to pay for mac and cheese. Sarah closed her laptop and pulled out a small notebook. She wrote down everything she owed and everything she had. The math didn't work, no matter how many times she rearranged the numbers. Something had to change. Morning came too quickly. Sarah woke Ethan, made breakfast, packed his lunch, and walked him to school. Her son chatted happily about a science project, unaware of the storm brewing around them. She envied his innocence. "Mrs. Torres wants us to build a model of the solar system. Can we go to the store for supplies?" "Sure, we'll figure something out this weekend," Sarah promised, wondering how she'd manage even that small expense. After dropping Ethan off, Sarah found herself walking toward the coffee shop where she used to write her articles. The owner, Frank, waved her in. "Sarah Miller. Haven't seen you in months. Coffee's on the house." She accepted gratefully, settling into her old corner table. The familiarity was both comforting and painful. This was where she'd interviewed the mayor, where she'd written the series on local businesses that won her a regional press award. "You still writing?" Frank asked, bringing over a muffin she hadn't ordered. "Trying to," she admitted. "It's been a rough year." Frank nodded. "Heard about the paper. Damn shame what happened." Sarah sipped her coffee, glancing at her phone. The contact information for David's company stared back at her. Westridge Communications needed a content manager according to the listing Jennifer had sent. It was a good job, stable, with benefits. Everything she needed. "Sometimes you gotta swallow your pride," Frank said, as if reading her mind. "My wife told me that when we nearly lost this place during the recession, had to ask her parents for a loan. Hardest phone call I ever made." Sarah smiled weakly. The thing about pride is it doesn't keep the lights on. After finishing her coffee, she stepped outside and made the call. The receptionist put her through to the hiring manager, Marion Wells. "Sarah Miller? Jennifer's sister?" "Yes, we should definitely talk. Can you come in tomorrow at 10? Just like that, a door opened. Sarah felt relief mixed with anxiety. The job was at David's company, but it was a large organization. She might never even see him. And if she did, well, they were adults. They had a child together. Surely they could manage to be professional. She picked Ethan up from school with renewed energy, stopping at the small park near their apartment. While he played on the swings, Sarah made a mental list of what she needed to do. Prepare for the interview. Find something professional to wear. Ask the neighbor to watch Ethan. "Mom, look how high I can go." Ethan called, pumping his legs furiously on the swing. "I see you, buddy. You're practically flying," she called back, watching his face light up with joy. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Sarah pulled out her old portfolio. Her fingers traced over headlines she'd written, stories she'd broken. Somewhere along the way, Between the divorce and the layoff and the struggle to keep things together, she'd forgotten who she was. Not just Ethan's mom, not just David's ex-wife. Sarah Miller, writer, person with skills and value. She updated her resume until midnight, then laid out her only interview outfit, a navy blazer, white blouse, and black pants. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and professional. Before turning out the light, Sarah looked at the eviction notice one more time. 30 days to change everything. The interview was just the first step, but for the first time in months, it felt like a step in the right direction. The Westridge Communications building was exactly as imposing as Sarah had feared. Glass and steel rose 15 stories into the sky, the company logo gleaming in the morning sun. She adjusted her blazer and checked her reflection one last time in her phone's camera. Her brown hair was neatly pulled back, and she'd applied just enough makeup to look professional without trying too hard. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, stepping through the revolving doors. The lobby bustled with activity. Well-dressed professionals moved with purpose, badges swinging from lanyards as they rushed to meetings and calls. Sarah approached the reception desk, giving her name and appointment time. The receptionist handed her a visitor's badge and directed her to the 11th floor. In the elevator, Sarah tried to calm her racing heart. She hadn't been this nervous for an interview since her first job out of college. But then again, she hadn't had so much riding on one in a long time either. The elevator doors opened, and Sarah stepped into a modern office. Space, clean lines, soft lighting, and the low hum of productivity. Before she could approach the reception area, a voice stopped her cold. "Sarah?" She turned slowly, already knowing who she would see. David stood a few feet away, coffee cup in hand, looking as surprised as she felt. He looked good. His dark hair had a touch more gray at the temples than when they were married, but his tall frame was still fit, his suit expensive but understated. "David." "Hi." She managed to keep her voice steady. "I have an interview with Marion Wells." Something flashed across his face. Confusion, maybe concern. "Marketing department?" Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling like she was making a huge mistake. "Jennifer sent me the listing." "I see." David shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm on my way to a meeting, but good luck." "Marion's good people." "Thanks." Sarah forced a smile. "How's Chloe?" she asked, referring to his new wife, immediately regretting bringing her up. "She's fine." David glanced at his watch. "I should go?" It's good to see you, Sarah." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing there with a strange mix of emotions. She hadn't expected to run into him so quickly. Part of her had hoped to at least get through the interview first, to feel more secure before facing him. A woman with a bright smile and curly hair approached. "Sarah Miller? I'm Marion Wells. Ready to chat." The interview went surprisingly well. Marion was easy to talk to, impressed with Sarah's portfolio, and candid about the company's needs. They needed someone who could manage their digital content, write compelling copy, and help develop their brand voice across platforms. It was exactly the kind of work Sarah had done before and loved. "Your experience at the paper is impressive," Marion said, reviewing Sarah's resume. "Why did you leave again?" "Budget cuts," Sarah explained. "They eliminated the local news section entirely." Marion nodded sympathetically. "Happening everywhere." "Well, their loss could be our gain. The team needs someone with real journalism experience." As they wrapped up, Marion walked Sarah back to the elevator. "We have a few more candidates to interview, but I'll be in touch by the end of the week. And Sarah, for what it's worth, I think you'd be a great fit here." Sarah left the building feeling cautiously optimistic. The job seemed perfect, challenging but doable, with regular hours that would work with Ethan's school schedule. The salary Marion had mentioned would solve their housing problem, and then some. The only complication was David. Working in the same building as her ex-husband wasn't ideal, but they were adults. It had been 3 years. Surely they could navigate this. On the bus ride home, Sarah called Jennifer. "How did it go?" her sister asked immediately. "Good, I think. Marion seemed to like me, but I ran into David." Jennifer went quiet for a moment. "Oh, I didn't think about that. Was it awful?" "No, just awkward. We were married for 10 years, Jen. Now we can barely make small talk in an elevator. Do you still want the job if they offer it?" Sarah looked out the window, watching the city pass by. "I need this job. Ethan and I need it." The next few days were a blur of anxiety. Sarah picked up an extra freelance project to keep herself busy and took Ethan shopping for his science project supplies, careful to use her nearly maxed-out credit card instead of the small amount of cash she had left. On Thursday evening, while helping Ethan paint his model planets, Sarah's phone rang. Marion's name flashed on the screen. "We'd like to offer you the position," Marion said after brief pleasantries. "Can you start Monday?" Relief washed over Sarah so strongly she had to sit down. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Marion." After hanging up, Sarah scooped Ethan into a hug, getting paint on her shirt in the process. "Mom, you're squishing me," he protested, though he was laughing. "Sorry, buddy. I'm just happy. I got a new job, a really good one." Ethan's eyes widened. "Does that mean we can get pizza tonight?" Sarah laughed. "Yes, we can definitely get pizza tonight." Later, after Ethan was in bed, Sarah called her landlord to explain the situation and make arrangements for the back rent. He agreed to work with her given the new job, extending their deadline by another month. One crisis averted. As she got ready for bed, Sarah found herself thinking about David. Seeing him had stirred up feelings she thought were long buried. Not romantic feelings, but a complicated mix of hurt, anger, and strange nostalgia. They had been happy once. They had created a beautiful child together. And then it had all fallen apart so quickly. The divorce had been David's idea. "We've grown in different directions," he'd said, as if they were plants instead of people who had built a life together. Sarah had later learned about Chloe, an account executive at his company. Whether the relationship had started before or after their separation, Sarah had never asked. Some questions were better left unanswered. Now she would be working in the same building as both of them. The thought made her stomach knot, but Sarah pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't about David. It wasn't even about her. It was about keeping a roof over her son's head and food on the table. It was about rebuilding what had been broken. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Marion told me you got the job. Congratulations. I want you to know I had nothing to do with it. This was all you." Sarah stared at the message, unsure how to feel. Was he being supportive, or making sure she knew he hadn't done her any favors? After a moment, she typed back a simple "thank you" and set her phone aside. Monday would come soon enough. She would face whatever challenges came with it, including working in the same building as her ex-husband and his new wife. Sarah had weathered worse storms. She would weather this one too, for Ethan's sake and her own. Sarah's first week at Westridge Communications passed in a blur of new faces, login credentials, and company procedures. Her desk was in the marketing department on the 11th floor, the same floor as David's office, though thankfully on the opposite end. She'd managed to avoid running into him after that first awkward encounter, though she caught herself scanning every hallway and break room before entering. Marion had introduced Sarah to the marketing team, designers, copywriters, and digital specialists who seemed genuinely pleased to have someone with journalism experience joining them. Her direct teammates, Ryan, a graphic designer with tattoo sleeves and a quick laugh, Zoe, a social media manager barely out of college, and Marcus, the analytical content strategist who spoke in data points, were welcoming and patient as she learned the ropes. By Friday, Sarah had settled into a routine. Drop Ethan at school, catch the 8:15 bus, grab coffee from the shop across from the office, and be at her desk by 9 o'clock. The steady paycheck and regular hours already made a difference in her stress level, though the shadow of the eviction notice still loomed. Her first paycheck would cover the current month's rent, but she still needed to catch up on the back payments. "We're going to Brewster's after work," Zoe announced, stopping by Sarah's desk. "First Friday tradition. You should come." Sarah hesitated. She'd already arranged for Mrs. Patel next door to watch Ethan until 6 o'clock. "I have to pick up my son by 6. "Perfect. We usually start around 5. Just for a drink or two, team bonding." Zoe's enthusiasm was infectious. "Please? Marcus never comes, and Ryan only talks about design trends. I need normal human conversation." Sarah smiled. "1 drink. I could manage that." Brewster's was a modern pub a block from the office, already filling with Friday after-work crowds when they arrived. Ryan secured a high-top table, while Zoe dragged Sarah to the bar to help carry drinks. "So, how's the first week been?" Zoe asked as they waited for the bartender. "Good. Busy but good. Everyone's been really helpful. Marion was right to hire you. That blog post you revised yesterday was so much better. The client actually said they liked it, which is a first." Sarah felt a small glow of pride. The work itself wasn't groundbreaking, corporate blogs, social media content, press releases, but it was writing, and she was good at it. After months of uncertainty, the simple satisfaction of doing her job well felt enormous. They returned to the table with drinks, and Ryan launched into a story about a disastrous client presentation that had the three of them laughing. Sarah checked her watch, calculating how long she could stay while still making it to pick up Ethan on time. Sarah? She looked up to see David standing by their table, coat draped over his arm. Her teammates fell silent, glancing between them with sudden interest. Hi, David. I thought that was you. He shifted awkwardly. How's the first week going? Good, thanks. Just having a quick drink with the team. Zoe's eyes widened with recognition. Wait, you two know each other? Before Sarah could decide how to answer, David spoke. Sarah's my ex-wife. He said it casually, as if announcing the weather. Our son is in 3rd grade now. 2nd grade, Sarah corrected automatically. Ethan's in 2nd grade. David's face flushed slightly. Right. 2nd. Sorry. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Ryan took a long sip of his beer. Zoe stared between them, clearly processing this new information. Well, David finally said, I should get going. Chloe's waiting. Have a good weekend, everyone. After he left, Zoe leaned forward. Ex-husband? Working in the same company? Why didn't you say anything? Sarah sighed. It's complicated. We've been divorced for 3 years. I needed a job, and this was a good opportunity. It's a big company, right? Not that big, Ryan muttered, then quickly added, but it's cool. Office drama keeps things interesting. Sarah drank her beer faster than she'd intended, suddenly eager to leave. This was exactly what she'd worried about, becoming the subject of office gossip, having her personal history follow her into her professional space. I should go. Need to pick up my son. Sarah gathered her things. Thanks for including me, though. Same time next week? Zoe asked hopefully. We're not scared off by a little family drama. Despite herself, Sarah smiled. Maybe. We'll see. The weekend brought a welcome break from navigating office politics. Sarah and Ethan spent Saturday at the library, then the park. On Sunday, they finished his solar system project, and Sarah helped him practice his presentation. Watching him carefully arrange the planets in order, his face scrunched in concentration, Sarah felt a surge of fierce love. Everything she did was for him. All the awkwardness with David, the cramped apartment, the years of struggle. Ethan was worth it. Do you think Dad would want to see my project? Ethan asked suddenly, looking up from his work. Sarah kept her expression neutral. Maybe. You can ask him when you see him next weekend. Ethan nodded, returning to his careful placement of Neptune. I think he would. He likes space stuff. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. Despite their issues, David was a decent father. He took Ethan every other weekend, remembered birthdays and school events, never missed a child support payment. It was the marriage he'd failed at, not parenting. Monday morning brought a meeting with the finance team about the company's quarterly report. Sarah had spent Sunday night preparing, reviewing past reports, and making notes on improvements. She felt confident walking into the conference room, until she saw Chloe sitting at the table. Of course, Chloe was in accounting. Sarah had known this abstractly, but hadn't connected it to her current project. Their eyes met briefly before Sarah looked away, taking a seat as far from Chloe as possible. The meeting proceeded professionally, if stiffly. Sarah presented her ideas for restructuring the report to make it more accessible to shareholders. Chloe asked a pointed question about timeline feasibility. Sarah answered calmly, despite her racing heart. Afterward, as people filtered out, Sarah found herself alone with Chloe in the elevator. The silence stretched painfully between them. Your ideas for the report were good, Chloe finally said, staring straight ahead at the elevator doors. Thanks. David didn't know you were applying here. Just so you know. Sarah turned to look at her. Chloe was pretty in a polished way. Sleek blonde hair, tasteful makeup, expensive clothes. Everything Sarah wasn't. I didn't know he worked here when I applied, Sarah replied. Or you, for that matter. Chloe nodded. We don't have to be friends. We just need to be professional. I can manage that. The elevator doors opened, and Chloe stepped out. Good, she said, not looking back. That evening, Sarah called Jennifer while making dinner. So I met Chloe today, she said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. The new wife? How was that? About as awkward as you'd expect. But we agreed to be professional, so there's that. Jennifer sighed. Are you sure about this job, Sarah? There have to be other options. Not that would pay the rent and let me be home for Ethan every night. Sarah tipped the vegetables into a pan. Besides, I'm good at this work. I'm not going to let David and his wife chase me away from a job I need. After dinner, while Ethan worked on homework, Sarah checked her bank account. Her first paycheck had cleared. She immediately transferred money to her landlord for the current month's rent, then calculated how long it would take to catch up on the back payments. 3 months, maybe 4 if she was careful with expenses. It wasn't ideal, but it was a plan. As she closed her laptop, Ethan called from the living room. "Mom, Dad's on the phone. He wants to know if he can take me to the science fair on Thursday." Sarah froze. The science fair. She'd planned to take off work early to attend. But David rarely asked to attend school functions. This was progress, the kind of co-parenting they should have been doing all along. "Tell him yes," she called back. "That's fine. Small steps," she reminded herself. That's how rebuilding worked. One decision, one day, 1 week at a time. The apartment, the job, the complicated relationship with her ex-husband. None of it was perfect, but it was progress. For now, that would have to be enough. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah kept checking her phone. She'd texted David that morning to remind him about Ethan's science fair presentation at 4:30, and he'd replied with a simple, "I remember." Still, old habits died hard. David had missed things before, back when they were married. Not because he didn't care, but because work often took precedence. "Working on something important?" Marion asked, stopping by Sarah's desk. Sarah quickly set her phone down. "No, sorry. Just checking the time. My son has his science fair today. Aren't you going?" His father is taking him. They don't get many school events together. Marion nodded approvingly. Co-parenting at its finest. "My ex and I could never manage that civility. You're ahead of the curve." Sarah smiled weakly, not wanting to explain the complicated reality. It wasn't so much civility as necessity. When the office emptied at 5, she found herself staring at her phone again. No messages, no missed calls. She tried not to read too much into the silence. Maybe they were having a good time. Maybe David had remembered how much these moments mattered. Her phone finally buzzed just after 6. Ethan won 3rd place. David's text was accompanied by a photo of their son grinning widely, holding a small trophy next to his solar system model. "We're getting ice cream to celebrate. I'll have him home by 7:30. Relief and a strange mix of emotions washed over Sarah. Pride in Ethan's accomplishment. Gratitude that David had followed through. And an unexpected pang of something like loss. She should have been there. This was the kind of moment parents were supposed to share. She texted back her congratulations and closed her laptop. The office was nearly empty now, just a few people working late. Sarah gathered her things, her mind already shifting to the weekend ahead. She needed to grocery shop, do laundry, help Ethan with his book report. The endless logistics of single parenthood never stopped. As she waited for the elevator, a familiar voice called her name. Chloe approached, looking somehow both impeccable and tired after a long day. "David just texted me about Ethan's science fair," she said. "Congratulations." "Thanks," Sarah replied, surprised by the overture. "I wish I could have been there, but work." "Yeah." Chloe shifted her weight, seeming uncomfortable. "Look, I know this is weird. All of it. But I want you to know I never meant to." The elevator doors opened, saving them both from the awkward conversation. They stepped inside in silence. "It's in the past," Sarah finally said as they descended. "We're all just trying to do what's best for Ethan now." Chloe nodded, and they parted ways in the lobby without further conversation. Sarah walked to the bus stop, thinking about how strange life had become. 3 years ago, she couldn't have imagined civil elevator conversations with the woman her husband had left her for. She certainly couldn't have imagined working in the same building as both of them. When she arrived home, Mrs. Patel from next door greeted her in the hallway. "Your boy did good today? With the planets." Sarah smiled. "3rd place. His dad took him for ice cream." Mrs. Patel nodded approvingly. "Good for the boy to have time with his father. And good for you to have an evening to yourself. When my children were small, I never had a moment alone." The thought hadn't occurred to Sarah. An evening to herself. No dinner to make. No homework to supervise. No bedtime routine. Just a few hours of quiet. She couldn't remember the last time that had happened. Inside her apartment, the silence was strange but not unwelcome. Sarah kicked off her shoes, ordered Chinese food, and settled on the couch with a book she'd been trying to finish for months. simple pleasures that had become rare luxuries. When David dropped Ethan off at 7:45, the boy burst through the door in a whirlwind of excitement. "Mom, I got third place, and Dad got me chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, and he said my presentation was the best one." Ethan thrust his trophy into Sarah's hands. "Can we put it on the shelf with your awards?" Sarah hugged him tightly. "Absolutely. I'm so proud of you." David lingered awkwardly in the doorway. "He did great. Really knew his stuff about the planets." "Thanks for taking him," Sarah said, meaning it. "It means a lot to him." David nodded. "I recorded his presentation. Thought you might want to see it." He held out his phone. "I can send it to you." The gesture caught Sarah off guard. It was thoughtful, the kind of thoughtfulness she hadn't experienced from David in years. "I'd like that. Thank you." After David left, Sarah and Ethan sat together on the couch, watching the video of his presentation. His small voice confidently explaining the order of the planets, the special features of each one, the careful way he'd painted the details. Sarah felt a fierce pride watching him, but also gratitude toward David for capturing this moment she'd missed. Later, as she tucked Ethan into bed, he asked the question she'd been dreading. "Why didn't you come to the science fair, Mom?" Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. "I had to work, buddy, but your dad really wanted to be there for you. And I gotta watch the video, so it's almost like I was there." Ethan seemed to consider this. Dad said his work is important, but family is more important. The word stung. That had been her argument, years ago, during the fights that preceded their divorce. David had always prioritized his career, his ambition. Now he was parroting her words back through their son. "He's right," Sarah said finally. "And next time, I'll be there. I promise." Over the weekend, Sarah and Ethan fell into their usual routine. Park on Saturday morning, library in the afternoon. Sunday groceries and laundry. But something had shifted in Sarah's thinking. The previous months had been about survival, keeping a roof over their heads, food on the table, maintaining the bare minimum. Now, with the immediate financial crisis easing, she found herself thinking about balance. What good was providing for Ethan if she missed the important moments? The science fairs, the soccer games, the small victories and disappointments that shaped his childhood? She'd taken this job to stabilize their lives, not to become so consumed by it that she repeated David's mistakes. Monday morning, Sarah arrived at work early and knocked on Marion's office door. "Got a minute?" Marion waved her in. "What's up?" "I wanted to talk about flexible scheduling," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from Marion's desk. "I missed my son's science fair last week, and it made me realize I need to find a better balance." Marion leaned back in her chair. "What did you have in mind? Maybe working from home one day a week? Or adjusting my hours so I can attend important school events?" Sarah had rehearsed this conversation all weekend, expecting resistance. Instead, Marion nodded. "Absolutely. We actually have a formal flexible work policy. I should have mentioned it during onboarding." She pulled up a document on her computer. Most of the team does some form of flex scheduling. Ryan works from home on Wednesdays. Zoe comes in early and leaves at 3. Relief washed over Sarah. "I didn't want to ask for special treatment, especially being so new." "It's not special treatment, it's company policy. Work-life balance isn't just a buzzword here." Marion smiled. "Fill out this form, and we'll make it official. Though fair warning, once you start setting boundaries, you have to maintain them. The work will always expand to fill the time you give it." Sarah left Marion's office feeling lighter than she had in months. The job was working out. The apartment was secure for now, and she was learning to navigate the complicated dynamics with David and Chloe. Small victories, but significant ones. That evening, as she helped Ethan with homework, her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Ethan forgot his reading book at my place this weekend. I can drop it by tomorrow morning before school." A year ago, this would have annoyed Sarah, another thing to coordinate, another interaction to navigate. Now, she simply texted back, "That would be great. Thanks." Progress came in many forms. She was learning. Sometimes it was a bigger paycheck or a flexible work schedule. Sometimes it was just finding a way to co-parent with Grace. Either way, she was moving forward, finding balance, rebuilding one small step at a time. 2 months into her new job, Sarah had found her rhythm. Mondays and Fridays in the office, Wednesdays working from home, and Tuesdays and Thursdays with flexible hours that allowed her to pick Ethan up from school. The arrangement wasn't perfect. She still worked evenings after Ethan went to bed to keep up with deadlines, but it was manageable. For the first time in over a year, she felt like she was thriving rather than just surviving. The quarterly report she'd restructured had been well received by the board, earning her praise from Marion and grudging respect from the finance team. Even Chloe had acknowledged the improvement in a brief email. Sarah had printed out the positive feedback and taped it to her refrigerator, a small trophy of professional accomplishment to balance Ethan's science fair award on the shelf. But the precarious balance Sarah had established came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday in April. She was in the middle of a client meeting when her phone vibrated repeatedly in her pocket. 3 calls in quick succession, the universal sign of emergency. Excusing herself, Sarah stepped into the hallway to check her messages. The school nurse had called. Ethan had fallen during recess, possibly broken his arm, and needed to go to the emergency room. Sarah's heart raced as she listened to the voicemail. The school had tried David next, but he wasn't answering. Sarah rushed back into the meeting. "I'm sorry, I have a family emergency. My son is hurt." The client, a middle-aged man with grown children, waved her off with understanding. "Go. Family first." She grabbed her things and hurried to Marion's office to explain, already calculating how long it would take to get to the school by bus. "Take my car," Marion said immediately, holding out her keys. "It's the blue Subaru in space 14. Just get it back to me by tomorrow." Sarah took the keys gratefully. "Thank you. I'll make up the work tonight, I promise." "Don't worry about that now. Just take care of your boy." The drive to Ethan's school took 15 minutes that felt like hours. When she arrived, she found him in the nurse's office, pale and tear-stained but surprisingly calm. His right arm was immobilized in a makeshift sling. "Mom, I fell off the monkey bars," he explained as she knelt beside him. "It really hurts." "I know, buddy. We're going to get you to the doctor right away." Sarah signed the release forms the nurse held out. "They'll fix you up." In the car, Ethan's brave facade began to crack. "Is it broken? Will I need surgery?" Tommy's brother had surgery when he broke his leg, and they put metal rods in it. "Let's not worry about that until the doctor looks at it, okay?" Sarah kept her voice steady despite her own worry. "I broke my arm when I was about your age, and all I needed was a cast. And then everyone at school signed it, remember? I told you that story." "I remember," Ethan said, slightly calmer. "Can I get a blue cast?" "If you need one, you can pick whatever color you want." The emergency room was predictably crowded. After triage, they settled in for what the nurse warned might be a long wait. Sarah texted David to let him know what had happened, then called her boss to update her. An hour passed, then 2. Ethan, exhausted from pain and stress, dozed against Sarah's shoulder. Her arm had gone numb, but she didn't dare move and risk waking him. She was scrolling through work emails one-handed when a familiar voice caught her attention. "Sarah? Ethan?" David stood a few feet away, looking worried and slightly disheveled, as if he'd rushed over. Behind him, surprisingly, was Chloe. "They haven't taken him back yet," Sarah explained quietly as David sat on Ethan's other side. "The nurse said it could be another hour. I came as soon as I saw your messages. I was in a pitch meeting, had my phone off." David looked at their sleeping son with concern. "How bad is it?" "They think it's broken, but they won't know until they get x-rays." Chloe, who had been standing awkwardly to the side, spoke up. "I brought some snacks and drinks. Hospital food is terrible." She held up a bag from the cafe near the office. "And I figured you probably hadn't eaten." The gesture was so unexpected that Sarah didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," she finally managed. "That's really thoughtful." The 3 adults settled into an uneasy silence, united only by their concern for Ethan. David flipped through an old magazine. Chloe tapped at her phone. Sarah tried to ignore the strangeness of sitting between her ex-husband and his new wife in a crowded emergency room. Finally, Ethan's name was called. He woke groggily, wincing as he remembered his injury. "Can we all come back?" Sarah asked the nurse, gesturing to David and Chloe. The nurse hesitated. "Parents only in the exam room." "I'm his father," David said. "I'll wait here," Chloe said quickly. "Text me with updates." The x-rays confirmed what they'd suspected, a clean break that wouldn't require surgery, just a cast for 6 weeks. Ethan, now fully awake and fortified with children's pain medication, was fascinated by the images of his own bones and delighted by the prospect of a blue cast. "And no school tomorrow," the doctor added with a smile. "Doctor's orders." By the time they emerged from the treatment area, Ethan sporting a bright blue cast and a sticker declaring him a brave patient. It was nearly 7 o'clock. Chloe had waited, working on her laptop in the corner of the waiting room. "All good?" she asked, gathering her things. "Clean break, 6 weeks in a cast," David reported. "No complications. Can I stay with Dad tonight?" Ethan asked suddenly, looking up at Sarah. "He has that big TV, and he said we could watch movies since I don't have school tomorrow." Sarah hesitated. It wasn't David's scheduled weekend, and she'd planned to stay home with Ethan herself. But the hopeful look on her son's face made her reconsider. "If that's okay with your dad, sure." David nodded. "Of course. I can work from home tomorrow." "I already cleared both your schedules," Chloe interjected. "Told the team there was a family emergency." Family emergency. The phrase hung in the air between them. By any definition, they were not a family, not anymore. And yet here they were, navigating this crisis together. Sarah was suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline of the afternoon had worn off, leaving her drained. "I should get Marion's car back to her. I can drive it back to the office tomorrow," David offered. "You look beat." "No, I can, Sarah." David's voice was gentle but firm. "Let us help. You've been here all afternoon. Go home, get some rest. I'll bring Marion's car to the office in the morning and pick up Ethan's medication on the way home." Too tired to argue, Sarah handed over Marion's keys and the prescription the doctor had given them. She knelt to hug Ethan carefully, mindful of his cast. "Be good for your dad, okay? I'll call you tomorrow." "Okay, Mom. Love you." "Love you too, buddy." In the parking lot, Sarah realized she now had no way to get home. Before she could pull out her phone to call a rideshare, Chloe approached. "I can drive you home," she offered. "My car's just over there." The offer was so unexpected that Sarah almost refused out of habit. But logic prevailed over pride. "That would be helpful. Thank you." The drive was quiet at first, just the sound of the windshield wipers against the light rain. Sarah gave directions to her apartment building, then lapsed into silence again, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked window. "He's a great kid," Chloe said finally. "Ethan, he's smart, polite. You've done a good job with him." "Thanks," Sarah replied, surprised by the compliment. "I never wanted kids," Chloe continued, eyes on the road. "Still don't, really. But I like Ethan. I want things to be good for him." Sarah studied the woman beside her. The perfect hair, the expensive clothes, the life that seemed so carefully curated. For the first time, she wondered if Chloe might be more complicated than the homewrecker caricature she'd created in her mind. "It's not easy," Sarah admitted. "Any of this. Co-parenting, working at the same company, trying to keep everything separate and functional." "No, it's not." Chloe signaled for a turn. "But we're all adults. We should be able to figure it out without making it harder than it needs to be." They pulled up in front of Sarah's building. Before getting out, Sarah turned to Chloe. "Thank you for the ride and for staying at the hospital all that time." Chloe shrugged. "Like I said, he's a great kid." That night, alone in her apartment, Sarah reflected on the strange afternoon. Her ex-husband and his new wife had shown up when Ethan needed them. More than that, they'd been kind, helpful, almost like friends wasn't the right word. Allies, maybe. She texted David before going to bed. "Thank you for being there today." His response came quickly. "Always, when it comes to Ethan. Get some rest, Sarah." As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah realized something had shifted. The complicated tangle of hurt and resentment she'd carried for 3 years hadn't disappeared, but it had loosened somehow. In its place was something else, not forgiveness, exactly, but a kind of peace. A recognition that the past was past, and what mattered now was building something workable for the future. For Ethan, and for herself. By summer, Sarah had caught up on the back rent and even managed to start a small savings account. The feeling of financial security, however modest, was still new enough to bring a smile to her face whenever she checked her bank balance. 6 months ago, she'd been on the verge of eviction. Now she was planning a weekend trip to the coast for Ethan's birthday in July. "You should see if David wants to join," Jennifer suggested during their weekly phone call. "Ethan would love having both of you there." Sarah paused in the middle of folding laundry. "I don't know, Jen. Things are better between us, but a whole weekend together? That feels like pushing it." "Just a thought. You've mentioned how much better the co-parenting has been lately." It was true. Since Ethan's broken arm, now fully healed, though he'd kept the cast for show and tell, the dynamics between Sarah, David, and even Chloe had shifted. They weren't friends, exactly, but they'd found a way to interact without the old tension. David had started attending more school events. Sarah had adjusted pickup and drop-off times when work demands required flexibility. They'd even managed a civil parent-teacher conference, sitting side by side, as Ms. Torres praised Ethan's progress. "I'll think about it," Sarah promised, though she had no intention of inviting her ex-husband on what was supposed to be a special trip with her son. At work, Sarah had settled into her role so comfortably that Marion had recently expanded her responsibilities to include mentoring the summer intern, a journalism student named Louise who reminded Sarah of herself at that age, eager, idealistic, slightly intimidated by the corporate environment. "How did you transition from newspapers to corporate content?" Louise asked during their coffee break. "Don't you miss writing stories that really matter?" Sarah considered the question, remembering her own initial reluctance about the shift. "I thought I would, but the truth is, storytelling is storytelling. Whether it's a community profile or explaining a client's value proposition, it comes down to finding the human element and connecting with your audience." "But isn't it less meaningful? Less impactful?" Sarah smiled at his earnestness. "My work helps pay for my son's school supplies and keeps a roof over our heads. That's pretty meaningful to me." Louise nodded thoughtfully. "I guess I never thought about it that way. Don't get me wrong, journalism is important. But so is feeding your family. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is just taking care of the people you love." Later that afternoon, Sarah received an email that made her heart skip. The subject line read, "Westridge Digital Magazine Launch, Editor Position." Marion had mentioned the company's plans to start a digital publication focused on industry trends and thought leadership, but Sarah hadn't expected the editor role to be announced so soon. The position description read like a perfect blend of her journalism background and her current marketing role, managing writers, shaping content strategy, conducting interviews with industry leaders. Without overthinking it, she drafted an application and sent it to the hiring committee. It was a long shot. She'd only been with the company for 6 months, but the opportunity felt too perfect to ignore. That evening, as Sarah helped Ethan with his summer reading log, her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Can we talk about the beach trip? Ethan mentioned it today." Sarah sighed. She should have known Ethan would tell his father about the birthday plans. "What about it?" she texted back. "He seems to think I'm coming along." I didn't want to disappoint him, but I also didn't want to assume. Sarah put down her phone, unsure how to respond. She'd planned the trip as special mother-son time, a celebration of how far they'd come since those dark days of nearly losing their apartment. Having David there would change the dynamic completely. "Mom, is Dad coming to the beach with us?" Ethan asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Would you like him to?" Sarah countered, buying time. Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, he said he'd teach me to boogie board if we ever went to the beach. And we could build a huge sand castle, all 3 of us." The hopeful look on his face made Sarah's resolve weaken. This was about Ethan, after all. His birthday, his wishes. And wasn't this what good co-parenting looked like? Setting aside personal feelings for the sake of their child? "Let me talk to your dad about it," she said finally. "We'll figure something out." After Ethan went to bed, Sarah called David instead of texting back. This conversation needed nuance that written words couldn't provide. "I had planned this as a Mom and Ethan trip," she explained after they'd exchanged pleasantries. "I didn't realize he was hoping you'd come too." "I understand," David said. "It's your weekend with him. I don't want to intrude. But he wants you there." Sarah took a deep breath. "And I'm trying to be better about putting his needs first." "We could make it work," David suggested cautiously. "I could get my own room, give you guys your space. Just join for beach time and meals." Sarah considered the proposal. It was reasonable, respectful of boundaries. "What about Chloe? She's going to New York that weekend for her college roommate's wedding. It would just be me." After a moment's hesitation, Sarah agreed. "Okay, for Ethan. But we need to be clear about expectations." "Absolutely. And Sarah? Thank you. I know this isn't what you planned." The call ended amicably, leaving Sarah with mixed feelings. The boundaries between her old life and new one were blurring in ways she hadn't anticipated. Was that progress or complication? She wasn't sure. The following week brought an unexpected development. Marion called Sarah into her office, closing the door behind her. Never a good sign. "You applied for the digital magazine editor position," Marion stated, her expression unreadable. Sarah nodded, suddenly nervous. I hope that was okay. I know I haven't been here that long, but it's more than okay. The hiring committee was impressed with your application. They want to interview you next week. Relief washed over Sarah. Really? That's fantastic. Before you get too excited, there's something you should know. Marion leaned forward. David is on the hiring committee. Sarah's smile faded. Oh, he's recused himself from your interview, of course. But I wanted you to be aware. No surprises. I appreciate that. Sarah's mind raced. Would this help or hurt her chances? Would others assume favoritism if she got the job? Should I withdraw my application? Marion looked surprised. Absolutely not. You're qualified. You have relevant experience, and your work here has been exceptional. Don't let personal complications derail your professional growth. The interview was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Sarah prepared meticulously, reviewing the publication strategy document, creating a 90-day plan, and practicing answers to potential questions. When the day arrived, she wore her best blazer, no longer borrowed, but purchased with her own money from her first bonus. The interview panel consisted of the VP of Marketing, the head of digital strategy, and a senior editor from an industry publication who'd been brought in as a consultant. David, true to his word, was absent. The questions were challenging but fair, focused on Sarah's vision for the magazine and her editorial experience. Final question, the VP said. This role will require occasional travel for industry events and interviews. Would that be a problem with your current situation? Sarah had anticipated this. I have strong support systems in place for my son, including his father who lives locally. Travel wouldn't be an issue as long as I have adequate notice to arrange childcare. Afterward, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. She'd answered well, demonstrated her knowledge, and connected with the panel. Now it was just a matter of waiting. The weekend beach trip arrived before the hiring decision. Sarah packed the car early Saturday morning, Ethan bouncing with excitement in the passenger seat. They would meet David at the beach house they'd rented, a modest but charming cottage a block from the ocean. The 2-hour drive passed quickly with Ethan chattering about all the beach activities he had planned. When they pulled up to the cottage, David's car was already there. He came out to help with their bags, and Ethan immediately launched into a detailed explanation of where he wanted to set up his birthday picnic the next day. I thought we'd get settled, then head to the beach for the afternoon, Sarah suggested, carrying groceries into the small kitchen. The weather's perfect today. Sounds good. David seemed determined to follow her lead, careful not to overstep. The awkwardness Sarah had feared never fully materialized. They fell into an easy routine, David taking Ethan swimming while Sarah prepared lunch. Sarah helping Ethan collect shells while David set up the beach umbrella. By dinner, they were sitting together on the porch, watching Ethan chase seagulls as the sun began to set. Thank you for this, David said quietly. I know it wasn't your first choice to have me here. Sarah shrugged. It's making him happy. That's what matters. Still, it means a lot. David hesitated. I miss so much, Sarah. Working late, traveling for business, always putting the job first. I don't want to make that mistake anymore. The confession caught her off guard. During their marriage, David had rarely acknowledged his absences, always justifying them as necessary sacrifices for their future. Now, years later, he was finally admitting what she had known all along. Better late than never, I guess, she said, not unkindly. They watched in comfortable silence as Ethan constructed an elaborate sand fortress, his face serious with concentration. This child they had created together, who somehow contained the best of both of them, deserved parents who could set aside their past for his sake. I heard your interview went well, David said after a while. For the editor position. Sarah glanced at him. I thought you recused yourself. I did, but word gets around. He smiled. For what it's worth, I think you'd be perfect for it. The next day, they celebrated Ethan's birthday with beach games, his favorite foods, and a small cake Sarah had brought from his favorite bakery. As they sang happy birthday, Sarah watched her son's face, alight with joy at having both his parents there to celebrate with him. Whatever complications their arrangement brought, moments like this made it worthwhile. On the drive home, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from sun and excitement. Sarah found herself reflecting on how much had changed in a year. From the brink of eviction to financial stability. From bitter co-parenting to something approaching friendship. From professional uncertainty to potential career advancement. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Unable to check while driving, Sarah pulled into a rest stop, curious. The message was from the VP of Marketing, with the subject line, Digital Magazine Editor Position, Offer. She read it twice to be sure. They were offering her the job, with a significant salary increase, more creative control, and yes, occasional travel. It was more than she'd hoped for, a perfect blend of her journalistic background and her new corporate skills. Sarah looked in the rearview mirror at her sleeping son, then at the email again. The path forward wasn't simple or straightforward. It never was, especially for a single mother. There would be new challenges, complicated logistics, difficult choices. But for the first time in years, Sarah felt equal to those challenges. She'd rebuilt her career. She'd created a stable home. She'd found a way to co-parent with grace. Not despite the hardships, but through them. Each obstacle had forced her to become stronger, more resilient, more determined. As she pulled back onto the highway toward home, Sarah felt a quiet confidence settle over her. Whatever came next, she was ready. Not because the journey would be easy, but because she'd proven to herself and to Ethan that they could weather the storms together and emerge stronger on the other side. New foundations had been laid. Now it was time to build.